If you look at like a massive corporate office building at night,
Right.
you can usually see exactly where the work is happening, right?
Oh, yeah. You just look for the lights.
Exactly. There's, a glowing window on the fourth floor. Somebody's hunched over a desk. Maybe a cleaning crew is moving through the lobby. It's all highly visible.
Right. You measure the effort by actually seeing who's in the chair, who's physically moving things forward.
But if you look at how work is being done in a modern enterprise today, that visibility is it's completely gone.
Yeah, it really is.
The most intense, heavy lifting work isn't happening in those glowing windows anymore. It's happening in the dark, entirely out of sight.
Which is kind of spooky when you think about it.
It is. So today, we're cutting straight through the Super Bowl ad hype and looking at the invisible workforce that's transforming your office right now. We're talking about ambient AI agents.
And to navigate this, we're relying on an incredibly insightful industry webinar. It's called The Hype, Myths, and Reality of Agentic AI.
Great title.
Right. It was presented by tech industry leaders from TSIA and Support Logic. And they laid out exactly what is happening on the ground, far beyond the theoretical hype.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right now, leadership teams across the globe are staring down a massive math problem.
A very expensive math problem.
Yeah. They're trying to figure out how to balance two competing forces. On one hand, you see all the headlines, right? Flattening hiring, layoffs, trimming the workforce to reduce labor costs.
But then on the other hand, they're taking those exact labor savings and pouring them directly into new AI capabilities.
Exactly. The ultimate vision here is that the overall cost to sell and service their products drops dramatically because the workflow itself fundamentally changes.
What's fascinating here is the historical context of how we actually arrived at this exact math problem.
Oh, right. The eras of computing.
Yeah. If you look back, we've gone through these distinct eras. In the 1990s, you had the SQL era, which forced us to distill complex business realities into highly rigid relational databases.
Rows, columns, strictly defined tables.
Exactly. If your data didn't fit the schema, like if you couldn't categorize a really nuanced customer complaint into a little drop-down menu, it was basically useless to the machine.
Right.
Then we moved into the SaaS and Web 2.0 era, taking that structured data to the cloud, making it accessible globally. But now we have officially crossed the threshold into the intelligence era.
And to really understand ambient AI, you first need to grasp the paradigm shift of this new era.
It's a huge shift.
For decades, humans essentially had to bend over backwards to learn the language of machines, right?
Absolutely.
We had to write code, use specific command prompts, and force our chaotic human reality into those neat SQL databases.
But the intelligence era flips that completely. For the first time, machines are learning human language. They can process what we call unstructured data.
That's the messy stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about your long-winded emails, scattered voice calls, Slack threads.
Sarcastic comments on a feedback form.
Yes. Or like 50-page Zoom transcripts. This is revolutionary because the vast majority of enterprise data is entirely unstructured.
It's just sitting there.
Exactly. Before, it was just this giant, unusable blob of text sitting on a server. We couldn't query an angry email the way we could query a spreadsheet, but now we can extract intent and intelligence from that blob in real time.
And I think this is where the confusion starts for a lot of people.
How so?
Well, we hear machines learning human language, and we immediately think of large language models, right?
Oh.
LLMs.
Right, like ChatGPT.
Yeah, and we assume you just take that conversational AI, plug it into the company network, and watch the magic happen.
Oh, if only it were that simple.
Right. But the sources are very clear that building a reliable enterprise AI tool isn't as simple as just buying an LLM API.
Not at all. The analogy they use in the source material is perfect. A large language model is basically a Ferrari engine.
Okay, Ferrari engine.
Yeah. It is a masterpiece of engineering. It's incredibly powerful, capable of processing massive amounts of data at blistering speeds. But you cannot drive an engine.
No, you definitely cannot.
If you try to sit on a bare engine block going 100 miles an hour, you're not going to survive the trip.
Wait, so if a company just buys an off-the-shelf LLM, they essentially just have a very fast, very hot engine sitting on their corporate lawn?
That is exactly what they have.
Wow.
I mean, it makes for a great flashy demo, you know? You can rev it up and impress your board of directors, but it is entirely useless for getting a family of 4 to the grocery store safely.
Or, in business terms, processing millions of sensitive customer transactions without causing a massive data breach.
Precisely.
So to make it an enterprise application to build the car, You need a whole lot more. You need the radiator to keep it from overheating. You need seat belts, headlights, a steering wheel.
And rigorous crash testing.
Exactly. And in the enterprise world, those seat belts and radiators translate to security protocols, data privacy compliance like GDPR and PCI, bias mitigation, and dynamic data redaction.
Which answers a frustration we hear all the time. People always ask, why is it taking my IT department so long to roll out AI at my job?
Right. Why the delay?
It takes time because they're desperately trying to build the car around the engine. If they deploy a raw engine and it hallucinates or leaks proprietary customer data into the public domain, the company faces ruinous fines.
So building the car is really about safe, practical, everyday application.
Exactly.
So if the car is this massive apparatus of security, compliance, and privacy guardrails, what does the finished vehicle actually look like when it hits the road?
Well, it doesn't look like the ChatGPT window we're all used to.
No.
No. To understand ambient AI, we have to draw a hard line between it and what most of us are interacting with today. Most of us use session-based AI.
Session-based, meaning?
Meaning you sit down, you open up a prompt window, you type a request, you get a response, and then you close the window. The session ends.
Got it.
It's entirely dependent on you initiating the interaction. It's reactive.
Ambient AI is the exact opposite. It runs in the background, 24/7. It's continuously analyzing signals, parsing unstructured data streams, and providing proactive recommendations without ever being asked.
You don't prompt it. It prompts you.
Right.
The source material uses a brilliant medical analogy here. Session-based AI is like going to the doctor to get your blood drawn because you feel sick.
You have to actually know you're sick first.
Exactly. You have to recognize there's a problem, make an appointment, physically go to the clinic and ask for an answer. Ambient AI is like wearing a continuous glucose monitor.
Oh, that makes sense.
It sits invisibly on your arm, constantly measuring your blood levels, and it sends an alert to your phone before your blood sugar crashes. It warns you before you even consciously know something is wrong.
Or, to go back to our automotive theme, it's the invisible computer in your car that monitors your tire pressure and engine temperature while you just focus on driving.
Exactly.
You know, it's the difference between a smart thermostat that learns your habits and adjusts the ring temperature invisibly based on the weather outside versus a cheap space heater you have to manually plug in and turn on every single time your toes get cold.
I like that.
Yeah. One is a tool you use, the other is an environment you inhabit.
And scale that thermostat up to the enterprise level, we're seeing a whole suite of these ambient agents running, as the sources call it, below the waterline.
Below the waterline, I like that phrase.
Yeah, they are entirely headless, meaning they don't even need a user interface to do their job. They just plug into the existing communication streams.
Let's list some of these out and look at how they actually function, because the mechanics are just fascinating. First, you have sentiment agents.
Right.
These are continuously running in the background, constantly measuring the mood of the customer across every interaction, not just at the end of a transaction.
Then you have escalation agents. These don't just wait for a customer to demand a manager.
They see it coming.
Exactly. They are constantly predicting when an issue is about to boil over into a massive crisis. They look for the early warning signs.
Like what?
Maybe a slight change in the customer's tone over 3 emails, or a subtle increase in the frequency of their messages before the actual explosion happens.
You also have routing agents. I mean, in a massive global organization, figuring out who has the exact right skills to handle a specific complex ticket is a nightmare. This agent does it instantly.
And coaching agents.
Oh man, this one is wild.
Yeah, these are agents that run in the background and silently coach employees on their soft skills.
So imagine a junior rep dealing with an angry client. The agent subtly prompts the rep to de-escalate, maybe flagging aggressive language or grammar issues in real time as they're typing the email.
Add to that prioritization agents and knowledge agents doing the exact same thing for workflow and information retrieval.
Surfacing the right technical document to the employee before they even realize they need to search for it.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The true mark of absolute perfect technology adoption is when people stop talking about it.
Because it just becomes normal.
Yeah. When it becomes so dissolved into the background of our daily lives that we don't even know we're using it. You don't think about the spell checker constantly scanning your document. It's just there.
Right.
That is the ultimate goal of ambient AI.
But for these ambient agents to run in the background and accurately predict human behavior, they need an immense amount of fuel.
Fuel being data.
Well, specifically context.
Context, which is exactly what businesses have historically been terrible at maintaining.
Oh, absolutely terrible.
Enterprise data is incredibly fragmented. Just think about the life cycle of a problem. A customer might be perfectly happy chatting with a sales rep on Monday, but by Wednesday they run into a bug and complain in an email to support.
And on Thursday, they have an angry Zoom call with an account manager.
Right. And on Friday, they trigger an automated IT server ticket because their system crashed completely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, traditional systems lose all of that context because the data lives in different silos.
Sales has no idea what support is doing.
Exactly. IT doesn't talk to account management. The data is fractured across Salesforce, Zendesk, Jira, and a dozen other platforms.
And historically, trying to centralize that data meant copying massive databases and moving them into one giant data lake.
Which is slow, incredibly expensive, and a massive security risk.
Yeah, every time you copy data, you create a new attack surface for hackers.
Yeah.
So how do ambient agents get around that physical limitation?
They use advanced architectural methods, specifically things called zero copy and differential sync.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. Instead of physically duplicating a massive database from the support team and moving it to the sales server, zero copy architecture allows the AI to simply point to the original data where it already lives.
Right, so it reads it in place.
Exactly. It doesn't move it.
So it's looking at the live data without creating a redundant, hackable copy somewhere else.
That's it. And then differential sync means it only updates the specific pieces of information that have changed since the last time it looked, rather than rereading the entire database.
Yeah, it's incredibly efficient.
It is. This allows the AI to stitch the context together across all those different platforms in real time over years of interactions.
So it remembers the email from 2023 and connects it to the Zoom call from this morning without moving a single file.
Without a single file moved.
Which totally breaks down those informational silos that have been the bane of the corporate world for decades. And it's important to note here that it's not just doing basic keyword searches across these platforms.
No, not at all.
The AI isn't just scanning a transcript and saying, oh, the customer said the word happy, so everything is fine. It's extracting incredibly complex, nuanced signals.
Because human business communication is messy.
Very messy.
Often, people are overly polite when they are actually furious. The AI is trained to detect impatience, confusion, and subtle frustration buried in professional language.
And it flags commercial signals too, right?
Yeah, like when an account is at risk of not renewing their contract based on a pattern of delayed responses. It even monitors outbound communication.
Like checking if a salesperson is making wild promises.
Exactly. If sales promises a feature the engineering team can't possibly deliver, the agent catches the discrepancy and flags it.
And it does all of this while deciphering technical jargon. It can tell the difference between a natural language complaint and a block of messy server error codes pasted directly into an email.
It reads the machine language and the human language simultaneously.
If you step back and look at your own life, think about how many times you've called a customer service line, got transferred, and had to repeat your entire problem to the second person.
Oh, the absolute worst.
And then you get transferred to a manager, and you have to repeat your problem to the third person. It is maddening.
It destroys customer loyalty faster than anything else.
But ambient AI is the technology that finally ends that frustrating cycle because it maintains that historical context flawlessly.
Yes.
The third person you talk to already knows exactly what you said to the first person, what error code triggered the call, and how frustrated you are before they even say hello.
It sounds almost like science fiction, this idea of a perfectly attuned, omniscient helper. But the sources are very explicit about this. This is not hype. This is reality.
These agents are deployed and running right now.
Yes, they are.
I hear that. But I also know that no enterprise rolls out experimental technology just for fun. It all comes down to hard numbers and return on investment.
Always.
And when the sources start talking about immediate ROI, my internal alarm bells go off. Enterprise software never pays for itself on day one. How are they possibly achieving that?
Well, the sources break down the ROI into a very clear timeline, and that immediate ROI, day zero, is driven by pure tech consolidation.
Consolidation. So getting rid of stuff.
Exactly. Companies are literally looking at their software stacks and canceling expensive, redundant licenses. Think about it. If you have an ambient sentiment agent running continuously in the background, measuring customer mood with perfect accuracy across every email and call, why on earth are you still paying $1 million a year for separate survey software?
Because surveys are reactive? They tell you how a customer felt yesterday or last week, if they even bother to fill it out.
Exactly. While Ambient AI tells you how they feel right now. So companies just eliminate the old survey software, boom, immediate quantifiable savings on day one.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Then you move into the near-term ROI, which is all about efficiency. The sources point out that escalations when a problem gets so bad it has to be kicked up to a senior manager are reduced by anywhere from 20% to 80%, with a solid median reduction of 50%.
That metric is huge because of the 80-20 rule in customer service.
Right.
20% of the escalations take up 80% of the human time and energy. Complex problems drain resources.
So if an escalation agent can predict and solve a problem before it reaches that boiling point, cutting those escalations in half, you're suddenly freeing up massive amounts of human capital. Your managers aren't spending their entire day putting out fires. They're actually managing and building.
Which leads directly into the long-term ROI. This revolves around something called net dollar retention, or NDR.
Which is the lifeblood of a modern software business.
Absolutely. When customers escalate issues, they get angry. And when they get angry, they use those service failures as leverage during contract renewals to demand flat pricing or massive discounts.
Yeah, they hold it over your head.
Right. By using an escalation agent to solve problems early, you directly protect your revenue. You stop the bleeding before the contract is even up for discussion.
So what does this all mean? We have this incredibly powerful system, saving money, predicting the future. But wait, if this thing is running invisibly in the background, stitching years of unstructured data together, what happens when it hallucinates?
The hallucination problem.
Yeah. We all know LLMs confidently invent garbage. If it hallucinates a fake technical manual and gives an engineer the wrong instructions, that's not just a bad customer experience, that's catastrophic. We can't just gloss over that risk.
You are absolutely right, and that is the single biggest bottleneck to enterprise adoption right now. You cannot have a headless agent guessing.
Definitely not.
This is where the car analogy comes back into play with those strict guardrails. The industry standard fix for this is a technology called RAG. That's retrieval-augmented generation.
Meaning it can't just pull answers from its general training data?
Correct. RAG forces the AI to check a specific walled-off set of verified corporate documents before it generates an answer. It anchors the LLM to your actual company data.
But the source material points out that for complex, highly technical enterprise data, standard RAG isn't enough to stop hallucinations.
It isn't. Standard RAG struggles with nuance because it relies heavily on vector similarity.
Which is basically finding text that looks conceptually similar.
Exactly. Imagine you have two technical manuals for two slightly different server models. They might share 95% of the exact same text.
Right.
Standard Margis gets confused, thinks they are the same document, and might pull the wrong instructions for a critical fix.
And that's where the catastrophic failure happens. So how is the industry actually fixing it?
They are moving toward precision ragas. This is an advanced architectural approach specifically built to navigate complex technical documentation.
So it's more accurate.
Much more. It doesn't just look for similar concepts. It understands the structural hierarchy of the documents, the metadata, and the subtle critical differences between nearly identical texts.
Nice.
It ensures the agent retrieves the exact right solution for the exact right scenario, bringing the hallucination rate down to a level that enterprises can actually trust.
Which leads to one final fascinating business shift mentioned in the sources. Because these ambient agents are becoming so reliable and so effective at taking on the workload, software pricing itself is fundamentally changing.
It has to change. Historically, software was sold on a per-user license model. You hire 1,000 employees, you buy 1,000 licenses from the vendor.
Makes sense.
But if ambient AI is making your workforce so hyper-efficient that you only need 500 employees to do the same amount of work, the software vendors are suddenly losing half their revenue.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So the vendors are pivoting. First, they're moving to usage-based pricing. Mm-hmm. So you pay based on how much data the AI processes or how many interactions it handles.
Right.
But ultimately, the holy grail they're moving toward is outcome-based pricing.
Yeah.
You don't pay for the software licenses. You pay based on the actual ROI the AI delivers.
Exactly. If the escalation agent demonstrably saves you $1 million in retained revenue, the vendor takes a percentage cut of that million. It completely aligns the incentives of the buyer and the seller. It's a profound restructuring of how the tech industry values its own tools. We're moving from paying for potential to paying for actual results.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the raw, untamed Ferrari engine of large language models, looking at how the intelligence era finally allowed machines to process messy, unstructured human data.
Which was a massive leap.
Yeah. And then we looked at how enterprises are struggling to build the necessary car around that engine to ensure safety, security, and compliance.
And we explored how that car eventually becomes entirely invisible, transforming into ambient AI agents.
The silent helpers?
Exactly. The silent helpers running continuously below the waterline, using zero-copy architecture to stitch together years of fragmented context across silos. They predict escalations, consolidate software stacks, and ultimately save companies a fortune in time and human capital.
The machines have learned our language and are listening to everything.
This raises an important question, though, something to really mull over. As this ambient AI becomes perfectly invisible, as it runs seamlessly in the background, predicting our business risks, drafting our technical responses, and constantly flawlessly measuring human sentiment, how will this change the nature of human intuition?
Oh, that's heavy.
Right. For decades, business leaders and professionals have relied on their gut feeling to read a room, to sense if a client is unhappy, or to know when a deal is going south. But if the invisible machine in the background is always right, do we eventually lose our own professional instinct?
Do we forget how to read the room because the machine is reading it for us?
Exactly.
That is a fascinating, slightly terrifying thought. As you go about your work today, take a second to look around. Think about all those mundane, frustrating bottlenecks you deal with, and wonder what invisible agents might already be running in the background or are about to be deployed to smooth them away.
They're already out there.
They are. And remember that massive corporate office building at night. The glowing windows might be going dark, but the work hasn't stopped. It just moved into the invisible spaces. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.